Maybe you've seen this and never really let it land. Two seedlings come up side by side in the same tray. Same soil, same watering can, same patch of window light. But they do not behave the same way. One grows broad and steady, almost calm. Another, next to a different plant, gets twitchy. It stretches faster. It leans sooner. It sends roots into the soil like it's trying to win a race nobody else noticed. Most of us shrug and call that randomness. A little more sun on one side. A slightly better pocket of soil. Pure chance. And sometimes, yes, that's exactly what it is. But sometimes, what you are watching is a plant reacting to who is beside it. That's the strange part. Not just that plants respond to light or water. We know that. The deeper question is whether the identity of a neighbor matters. Whether one plant can, in any meaningful sense, distinguish family from stranger, ally from competitor, warning from background noise. Do plants have a favorite neighbor? In a human way, no. Not preference with feelings, memory, and affection the way we experience it. In a biological way, surprisingly often, yes. And once you see that, a pot on a windowsill stops looking like decoration. It starts looking like a neighborhood full of signals. The reason this is easy to miss is because the surface-level explanation feels so reasonable. Plants are rooted in place. They don't walk toward company. They don't make faces. They don't announce decisions. So we imagine they simply endure whatever grows nearby. Stillness looks like passivity. But in biology, stillness and passivity are not the same thing. A plant is constantly sampling its surroundings. It reads the color of incoming light. It detects touch. It monitors moisture gradients and nutrient levels. It releases chemicals from its roots and senses chemicals released by other roots. It can smell volatile compounds in the air. Inside its own tissues, it uses electrical signals, hormone pulses, and calcium waves to carry information from one part of the body to another. No brain, no neurons, but definitely no silence. That distinction matters because this is where plant behavior starts to feel less like a metaphor and more like a system. A plant doesn't need a face to recognize a pattern. It doesn't need eyes to know a neighbor is close. It doesn't need emotion to change strategy. It just needs sensors, signaling, and enough evolutionary pressure for those responses to matter. And they do. Take light, for example. Long before one plant physically bumps into another, it can often tell that someone is nearby. How? Because leaves change light. Plants absorb a lot of red light for photosynthesis and reflect more far light. So when sunlight has already passed through or bounced off another plant, its color balance shifts. To us, the change is invisible. To a plant, it's information. Plants use light receptors called phytochromes to read that red-to-fard ratio. In plain language, they can detect the signature of nearby vegetation before they are fully shaded. That means a plant doesn't wait to be trapped under a rival's leaves. It can start adjusting early. If the signal suggests crowding, some plants launch what biologists call a shade-avoidance response. They grow taller, they lengthen stems, they change leaf angles. Sometimes they flower earlier. It looks like ambition. It's really a preemptive survival move. And that reframe is important because when a plant suddenly gets leggy or seems to reach frantically, we often think of it as weak or poorly behaved. But in many cases, the plant is not malfunctioning. It is reading the room. It has noticed a neighbor. Now go below the soil, and things get even stranger. Roots are not just passive drinking straws. They are chemically active, information-rich organs. As they grow, they release compounds into the soil, often called exudates, sugars, amino acids, organic acids, secondary chemicals. Some help recruit microbes. Some alter the soil environment. Some become clues to any nearby root system. So beneath the surface, where we imagine darkness and stillness, there is actually a constant exchange of traces, a kind of chemical handwriting. And some plants appear able to respond differently depending on whose handwriting they detect. One of the best-known examples came from ecologists Susan Dudley and Amanda File in 2007, studying sea rocket, a coastal plant. They found that when sea rocket was grown with unrelated individuals, it tended to invest more heavily in root growth than when it was grown with siblings. Same species, similar conditions, different neighbor identity. The interpretation was careful but powerful. Around strangers, the plant behaved more competitively, below ground. Around kin, it seemed to ease off. Not friendship, not kindness, but possibly kin recognition. From an evolutionary point of view, that makes sense. If you pour energy into fighting your relatives, you may be wasting resources in a contest where the genetic payoff is more complicated than simply beating a stranger. In some cases, less aggression around kin can be favored because relatives share genes. Natural selection doesn't need a plant to care. It only needs a strategy that pays off over generations. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this topic. The behavior feels almost social, but the mechanism can be entirely biological. No sentiment required. Now, to stay honest, this is not a universal rule. Plant species vary. Experimental results vary. Environment matters. Some studies support kin recognition strongly. Some find weaker effects. Some plants may respond more to nutrient depletion, microbial differences, or root density than to kinship itself. This is an active area of research. Not a fairy tale with a tidy ending, but the big conclusion still stands. Neighbor identity can matter, and that alone changes the story. Because once a plant can distinguish one kind of neighbor from another, the question stops being, is this plant just growing? And becomes, what kind of company is shaping this growth? Sometimes the answer is family. Sometimes it is the opposite. Some plants do worse near close relatives because relatives often want the same nutrients, attract the same herbivores, and share the same pathogens. In forests and wild plant communities, being too close to your own kind can be dangerous. Soil-borne enemies build up. Insect specialists find easy targets. The parent's neighborhood is not always the safest place for the child, so a plant's favorite neighbor is not necessarily one that looks most like itself. That's the twist. Plants are not searching for friendship. They are navigating fit. Chemistry, risk, opportunity, information quality. And the information doesn't only come from roots, it also comes through the air. When insects chew on a leaf, many plants release volatile organic compounds, airborne chemicals that can travel to nearby leaves and nearby plants. These compounds can attract predators of the herbivore, prime defenses in undamaged tissues, or warn neighbors that danger is close. This area became widely known through work by researchers like Richard Carbon, who studied sagebrush and wild tobacco. Damage to one plant could change the chemistry of the air around it, and nearby plants exposed to those cues could respond by strengthening defenses. Again, we have to stay precise. This is not plants chatting in sentences. It is not proof of intention in the human sense, but it is communication in the biological sense. A signal released by one organism changes the behavior of another. And just like with roots, not every neighbor is equally meaningful. Signal reliability matters. Some plants respond more strongly to cues from their own species or from species they've evolved alongside. A warning only helps if you can interpret it. So now the picture is larger. A plant may detect a nearby body through light. It may detect a nearby root through chemistry. It may detect nearby danger through smell. That quiet organism in your living room, on your balcony, or out in the roadside grass is not simply there. It is continuously asking questions in the only language evolution gave it. Who is beside me? Are you blocking light? Are you using the same soil? Are you kin? Are you a threat? Are you sending a warning I can trust? If the word intelligence feels too loaded here, use another word: sensitivity, information processing, decision-making. The labels are debated. The behavior is not. And then there is the underground world that makes the whole idea of neighborhood even more complicated. fungi, microbes, and shared soil networks. Plants do not meet each other in bare dirt. They meet in living soil, packed with bacteria, fungi, and tiny chemical transactions. We are only beginning to map clearly. A neighbor can change your world without touching you, simply by changing the microbial community around your roots. Some plants recruit helpful microbes. Some alter pH, some leak compounds that suppress competitors. Some improve nitrogen availability. Some make the local soil more hospitable. Others make it worse. This is one reason companion effects in nature can be real without being mystical. Sometimes a plant grows better next to another because that other plant changes the environment in a useful way. It may buffer heat, hold moisture, slow wind, recruit better microbes, feed fungi that connect to multiple roots. Research by forest ecologists, including Suzanne Simard, helped popularize the idea that shared mycorrhizal networks, fungal connections in the soil, can move carbon, nutrients, and signals between plants under some conditions. This field is fascinating, and also easy to oversimplify. These fungal networks are not a woodland version of human generosity. Fungi have their own interests. Plants compete through them as well as benefit through them. But the larger point still matters. A plant's neighborhood is not just the stems you can see. It is also the invisible infrastructure beneath them, which means a good neighbor may be one that helps create a better underground economy. A bad neighbor may poison it, drain it, or distort it. Ecologists have seen related versions of this for years in harsh landscapes through what are called nurse plants. In deserts, alpine zones, and other difficult environments, young plants often establish more successfully near certain older plants that provide shade, reduce temperature extremes, trap moisture, and improve local soil conditions. The young plant is not choosing a friend in the emotional sense, but its odds of survival are transformed by who is nearby. That, to me, is where the question becomes deeply human. Because we tend to divide life into two categories: creatures that act, and organisms that just exist. Animals get behavior, plants get scenery. But when you look closely, plants are behaving all the time, just slowly, chemically, architecturally, in signals rather than gestures. And one of the most revealing behaviors is this quiet calibration to neighbors. A plant next to a compatible species may invest less in panic and more in growth. A plant next to a stranger may brace for competition. A plant that smells damaged neighbors may harden itself before the attack arrives. A seedling under a nurse shrub may survive a season. It would never survive alone. So the reframe is not that plants like each other the way we do. It's something, in a way, more profound. Life was building relationships long before it built feelings like ours. Not relationships of affection necessarily, but relationships of consequence, interdependence, recognition, strategy, mutual shaping. And once you realize that, an ordinary plant moment becomes almost impossible to see as ordinary again. The bean seedling twining near another stem. The houseplant suddenly stretching when crowded. The wildflower patch, where one species appears only beneath another. The tree seedling that thrives in one pocket of forest and fails a few feet away. These are not always random quirks. Sometimes they are the visible edge of a hidden negotiation. There's also a warning in this. When we ignore plant neighbor effects, we tend to flatten ecosystems into lists of species instead of living arrangements. But arrangement matters. Diversity matters. Microbial context matters. Remove the wrong neighbor, and you don't just remove a plant. You remove shade, warning cues, soil chemistry, fungal partnerships, insect relationships, and the conditions that made survival possible for others. That is one reason ecological damage can look subtle at first. The landscape may still appear green. Individual plants may still be standing. But a neighborhood can be broken long before a forest or meadow looks obviously dead. Even on a smaller scale, we misread stress when we miss context. A plant that becomes spindly, defensive, or stunted is not always simply bad at growing. It may be responding to crowding signals, incompatible root competition, missing microbial partners, or a neighborhood that no longer makes biological sense. Healthy plant life is not just about resources, it is also about information. That may be the deepest answer to the question. Do plants have a favorite neighbor? Not favorite in the sentimental sense, but yes, many plants clearly behave as though some neighbors are better than others. Some are safer to grow beside, some are worth listening to. Some change the soil in helpful ways. Some trigger costly competition. Some raise the alarm. Some create the only conditions in which another plant can survive at all. And that means the green world around us is not a silent collection of isolated individuals. It is a field of ongoing assessments. A plant is not sitting there doing nothing. It is sensing, comparing, adjusting, allocating, preparing. It is living in relation. So the next time you notice one plant thriving beside another, or one seedling changing its whole posture because something moved into its space, pause for a second before you call it random. You may be looking at a choice without a brain, a signal without a voice, a relationship without emotion, but not without meaning. And that is the part I find hardest to forget, because it suggests that even in the stillest corners of life, there is awareness of a kind. Not human awareness, not animal awareness, but a persistent, ancient sensitivity to others. A recognition that survival is rarely solitary. If you've ever seen two plants that seemed to thrive together, or one plant that changed the moment a new neighbor appeared, tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you've noticed. And if you want more of these hidden plant stories, subscribe. There is a lot more happening in the green world than it first lets us see.